Good afternoon. I'm here joined by Mayor Brandon Scott, our State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby, our Council President Nick Mosby, Director Vernon Herron, who leads our Officer Safety and Wellness Program, who has been working around the clock to make sure our personnel are ready and are able to be at work and do a great job. Colonel Worley from our Criminal Investigations Division, Major Edwards, who leads our Homicide Division, Chief K.T. Yeager, who leads our Science and Evidence Division. And I think we're also joined by Ms. Bledsoe from the State's Attorney's Office. We're here to provide an update on the shooting investigation of Officer Kiana Holly. First and foremost, I want to reiterate that our prayers continue to be with Officer Holly's family and her loved ones, her co-workers, and the entire community. We continue to provide them with our resources and our support. We just had a conversation with them to update them on what we're about to tell the general community. This week's heinous incidents were another tragic reminder of the culture of violence that pervades Baltimore. As I said last night, those who commit these violent, brazen, and cowardly acts in our city will be held to account. We will always work to bring justice to all of the victims of violence. On December 16th, members of our Regional Auto Theft Task Force located a vehicle that our homicide investigators identified as being linked to the shooting of Officer Holly. This vehicle was identified through an extensive area canvass and a great deal of video footage that was recovered. A person of interest was also identified, located, and then transported to our homicide section to be interviewed. Additionally, investigators learned the identity of a second person of interest, and we were able to take him into custody also. While our investigators were processing the shooting scene of Officer Holly, another shooting homicide occurred in the 600 block of Lucia Avenue. What we now know is that both shootings are related, as we now know the perpetrators of Officer Holly's shooting, they then left that scene, went to Lucia Avenue, and then committed that homicide of Justin Johnson. And our thoughts and prayers are with his family, who we have spoken with recently as well. Our investigators were able to locate and recover 2 weapons believed to have been used in both incidents, one of which has been confirmed to have been used in both incidents. The suspects are identified as 31-year-old Elliot Knox and 32-year-old Trayvon Shaw. Both individuals have been transported to Central Booking for formal processing. Both are being charged for the attempted murder of Kiana Holly, as well as the murder of Justin Johnson, which occurred in the 600 block of Lucia Avenue. I want to thank everyone here today, as well as Deputy Commissioner Briscoe, who couldn't be here, and the lead detectives in the case of Officer Holly shooting, Detective Caesar Muhammad and Sergeant Safian Hassan, and then the detectives in the second case on Lucia Avenue, Detective Michael Voderick and Sergeant Sean Jones. Additionally, we would not have been able to accomplish such an exhaustive and thorough investigation without our local, state, and federal partners, Crime Laboratory, the Warrant Apprehension Task Force, the Baltimore City State's Attorney's Office, and certainly cooperation from the community. I would also like to recognize the superb work of our homicide detectives who worked tirelessly, performing an outstanding and spectacular job under very difficult circumstances. I could not be more proud of the work of the entire Baltimore Police Department and the speed and skill in which the investigations were conducted. Earlier today, I received a call from the Attorney General of the United States, Merrick Garland, who was committing every resource available to help us. And then when he learned the status of the case, then offered his congratulations to our team for their professionalism, determination, and for a swift closure. We all came together to work around the clock and through the night to ensure that we were able to get justice for Officer Holly. I am so grateful for the reward money offered by the FBI, the ATF, the Marshal Service, the FOP, Metro Crime Stoppers, and numerous tips that we received from community members. Those tips aided us in putting pieces together like putting together pieces of a puzzle. And so I'm certainly grateful for everyone who had anything to do with all of these cases that we now have brought to closure. And we remain committed to praying for these families as they now recover, and we think justice is being served. This time I'll turn it over to our mayor, who will give comments.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner, and thank you all for being here this afternoon. As you've already heard, the Baltimore Police Department have made an arrest this morning in the cowardly attack on Officer Kiana Holly and the cowardly murder of Justin Johnson. Yesterday, you all heard me say that I had no doubt that our officers and detectives would find those responsible, and now you know why. We have the best homicide detectives in the world, the best crime lab in the world, and I cannot thank them and all of the members of BPD enough for their diligent work in apprehending those responsible for these heinous and cowardly acts. We don't say it enough to them for the great work that they do to bring peace to families, to have those conversations, to look at that information, to use science to be able to bring peace to these families and help our city heal. So I want all of us to really thank them for their tireless work, and they are the best in the world. I also want to express gratitude for the outpouring of support that we've received from our other local partners, our state partners, our federal partners, and law enforcement agencies from around the region who have offered support to us in this time. And I really also want to thank and offer a huge thank you to Director Hearn and our Officer Wellness Bureau, who has done a great job of making sure that they support our officers and their families in this trying time. And I pray that these efforts will bring some sort of peace to Kiana and Justin's families, to Curtis Bay, to Yale Heights, the entire city of Baltimore, and our police department. But I also want to say something that I think is very critical to say again. Building a better Baltimore, a safer Baltimore, is a team effort. And it requires all of us who say we love Baltimore, before we do anything else, before we say that the police have to do more or do better, to do what we should do what Kiana did. And that's look in the mirror and consider our role and responsibility in making our city a safer city. I am committed to doing my part as mayor, but more importantly, as a son and a man in Baltimore City and a member of our community. 2 years ago, Kiana took that deep look in the mirror and did just that. Despite the risk, knowing her city, she joined the Baltimore Police Department because she wanted to make a difference in her city, in her community. She wanted to protect and serve her community. And I want those responsible for this attack and anyone else who is thinking about turning to violence for whatever reason, be it to solve some petty beef, be it to get back at somebody for some interpersonal thing, be it that you can't take that your ex-loved one has moved on, to know that hurting someone's mother, someone's son, someone's daughter, or whomever does not and will not make you tough. It will not make you a big man. It will not increase your credibility. It actually shows your weakness. And I think those who know Baltimore lingo know those aren't the words that I want to use right now, but you know there are other choice words that couldn't be said. There is nothing courageous or brave or tough or big or bad or bold about ambushing someone's mother, someone's daughter, someone's sister, or killing someone's son in cold blood. These were brazen and senseless acts of violence, and it shows how far we have to go to show people and how to make sure that folks understand that this cannot continue and that you cannot snuff someone out for something so petty. You cannot think that our police officers should be a target for you. No one should be a target. We have to be better. And I also want to be clear that the shooting of a teenager or attacking a grandmother, that also doesn't make you tough. We have to expose the folks that think like this as a community, in addition with our police department, with all the efforts that we have going on. The folks who are doing this are cowards. They're spineless. And those who are harboring them are the same. We cannot allow these folks to return back into our community, to go out with them to watch the Ravens, to go out with them to the mall, to the movies, to a restaurant. We cannot allow those people to continue to live amongst us. There are opportunities and ways for you to help us deal with these people in very different ways. I also want you to keep the family of Officer Holly and of Justin in your prayers. Pray for a recovery for Officer Holly. Pray that this family of Justin gets some peace from this loss as they go into the holiday season. And as well, I want you to thank and pray for the entire team at Shock Trauma who are working on Officer Holly continuously to try to bring her back to her family so that we can continue to see her light shine, which we will do each and every day. And lastly, I'll say as your mayor, I am committed to doing everything in my power to making Baltimore a safer city, and ask that everyone that loves Baltimore join me in doing that. And I'll turn it over to our state's attorney. And as I do that, I want to thank her office for working through the night with our homicide detectives to be able to bring this case to a closure. Madam State's Attorney.
Good afternoon. In this moment, I cannot overstate how angry and disheartened we all are that we continue to have those in our community who are intent on committing violent acts, especially against law enforcement officers. It is unacceptable, and we will not tolerate it. Which is why I stand before you today with Commissioner Harrison, Mayor Scott, Council President Mosby, Chief Deputy Janice Bledsoe, members of Baltimore Police Department, to say that we will have zero tolerance for those who seek to use violence and murder to settle their grievances. And the criminals that do will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I cannot thank Commissioner Harrison and the entire Baltimore Police Department enough for their incredible work in apprehending the perpetrators of these heinous acts, and so quickly. I especially want to acknowledge the homicide detectives that, as you've already heard, worked with through the night until 4 o'clock in the morning. Specifically, Detective Caesar Muhammad and Detective Dave Moynihan, as well as working with my prosecutor, one of the best and the brightest, Chandrea Hanna, who, because of their relentless commitment to this city, working through the night nonstop around the clock since yesterday to ensure some measure of accountability in apprehending the perpetrators of these offenses. Because of them, the citizens of Baltimore will rest better knowing that these brazen criminals are off our streets. Any loss of life is tragic and robs our city of so much of our potential greatness. But any individual who seeks to target those who protect and serve our city crosses the line of any acceptability. And although the defendants are presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty, my office has every intention and is committed to ensuring accountability to the fullest extent of the law. Today, as a city, we send a message to anyone who wishes to foster an atmosphere of fear within our neighborhoods that reckless violence will not be tolerated by the community or by the Baltimore City law enforcement. As Officer Holly continues to fight and fight for her life, we vow to her, her family, her colleagues, this community, that we will get justice on her behalf. For every victim that has been affected by these heinous acts of violence, we will get justice on their behalf. So together, we send our condolences to the family of Justin Davis, and I only ask that as a city, we continue to keep Officer Holly and her family in our prayers and in our thoughts as Officer Holly valiantly fights for her life. Together, we stand with her family in total support at this very difficult time. Thank you.
So, once again, let me just tell you, thank you. Outstanding work, and thank you. The people of Baltimore, thank you. And I couldn't be more proud to be the leader of this police department who has performed masterfully. And we want to make sure we acknowledge that. I see you. I see your work. The rest of Baltimore now sees your work. Thank you. This time we'll take a few questions. Amanda will guide you through it. So while we had extensive interviews, we don't quite have motive. We don't know why they did this. We have absolute confessions that they did it, they were there. We don't have motive as to why.
Commissioner, is there any indication that these two had any prior run-in with Officer Holly? Was this completely random? Can you give us an indication of whether or not there was some sort of connection?
We don't believe it's random, but we also, at this time, still early in the investigation, don't have the answer as to whether or not there are previous contacts. That's what's being investigated, and investigators, along with federal agents, are working together to get the answers to those questions.
Yes, Mayor. Do either of these suspects have a criminal history, and should they have been out on the streets?
They both have criminal history. I don't know that they were actually on supervised probation at the moment. They both have one more than the other pretty extensive criminal history.
And in more than one jurisdiction.
And in more than one jurisdiction, by the way.
Do you know anything about the guns that they had? Were they illegally owned?
What we can say is the guns did not belong to them. We had information about where they were. Investigators did a masterful job uncovering that, and throughout the night, with assistance, recovered those guns. Director Yeager, who handles our science and laboratory, his job did run ballistics tests. We have confirmed that one of them is tied to both shooting incidents. We're still waiting on the results of the second. But we know for a fact, what we know is that 2 guns were used, 2 guns were recovered.
Yesterday, when we were on council meeting at Choctaw, there was another family there who was grieving the loss of their nephew. They were frustrated, and they say that they don't care about the 5-year plan. Their 17-year-old nephew who was shot and killed doesn't have 5 more years. What kind of message do you send to the community members who are losing people right now and are frustrated that the plan doesn't seem to be working?
Yeah, I got that one. So I thank you for that, Mackenzie. I think that we're frustrated too. And we say that again, and I'll say this in another way. I've said multiple times that it's not about just 5 years, it's about today. You can see the work that our police department does every day to make the city a safer place. You can see that they have a homicide clearance rate that is 6% more than it was last year. You can see that they have a shooting clearance rate that is 6% more than you've seen last year. You can see the amount of guns that they're getting off the street. But we also are going to continue, and we immediately, actually after that, the commissioner and I, that's the first thing that I asked him about was that particular case and what we knew about that case, because I personally take every single one of them personally because I feel like we all have to be better, and we feel for that family. But we also know once and again that Baltimore has had this violence longer than I breathe air, and all of us are going to have to commit to doing what we can do now, next year, 3 years, 4 years, and 5 years. But we all have to also know that there are people in our city who don't care about the police, they don't care about going to jail, they don't care about losing their life. They would say that they would rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6. We have to get to those people and get those folks who are committing the violence out of our community, and that's something that we're going to focus on every day. We know that that's not a switch that we can flip overnight, but we're not going to rest until it continues to grow for our city, and we're also not going to allow people's pain and suffering to be used for propaganda. We're going to actually work with those people and those families each and every day.
Does the prosecution policies feed into that
So I guess that question's for me, and I would say anybody that thinks that way is illogical and irrational. To say that we're not going to prosecute, there's some sort of correlation to individuals that are urinating in public, and somehow that's related to this heinous act of violence against a police officer, that's just something that's illogical to me.
Isn't it about consequences?
It's about what?
The lack of consequences for crimes across the state?
No, I'm sorry. Anybody that draws a correlation to urinating in public to this heinous act, it's illogical, it's irrational.
Thank you. So, Commissioner and detectives, if you would, how did investigators link these two incidents?
First of all, they're very good investigators. That's number one. We have very good scientists. That's number two. We're a very good police department. That's number three. And we have very good technology. And what we have is a number of cameras, personally owned home cameras, along with license plate readers. Putting the puzzle together with both of them led us to a vehicle. When we found the vehicle, we found the person of interest and confiscated the vehicle, took the person of interest into custody. The rest is great detective work.
I just have one question. Is there updates on the officer's condition?
We had a conversation with her mother and sister right before we came here, and we had a conversation with Justin Johnson's family as well. There is no update. What they told us is that Dr. Scalea gave a critical but stable diagnosis.
Sorry, just a follow-up. The other victim's family, did they know these suspects at all? Or
I'm sorry?
does the other victim's family, did they know the suspects at all? Or-
That's unknown.
Has this tragedy forced you to rethink your policy on one officer per patrol unit, or putting two officers to patrol units just to ensure safety for your officers?
That question has come up, and to be honest, around the country that question comes up. There is no data anywhere in America that suggests that two officers in a car is safer than one officer in a car. Most departments, most large city departments, use the single officer per car concept. There are some types of tactical work that we do where it requires two officers, but patrol response, it doesn't require that. Quite honestly, if we did that, we wouldn't have enough officers or cars or a combination of both to effectively do that and still cover the whole city the way we do it now. What we can make sure that we do is make sure our officers are mentally and physically fit every single day, that they are given good information, good intelligence, and good instructions, and that they're well supervised. Those are the things that we think keep us safe. Good training, all of those things.
Just to follow up, what's been your message to officers who are out on the streets? How have you encouraged them? What have you said to them?
We've been going to roll calls, especially in the Southern District, by the officers who were affected. The message is, number one, thank you. Thank you for your commitment. In spite of what they are going through, in spite of what all of us are going through, many of them continue to show up, although we offered them time off, to breathe, to slow down just a little bit, to recuperate. Many of them still showed up and performed work and did it very well. The message is thank you. The message is we're here to support you. Director Herron was with us giving them meals to eat, providing counselors and chaplains and local pastors to help them through the grieving process. And the message is we're here to support you. And we thank you on behalf of the residents of the city. We just want to say thank you for your commitment, for your service, for your courage.
Where were those recovered?
They were recovered at a residence in Baltimore County, if I'm not correct. If I'm correct.
Did the suspects know Mr. Johnson?
You know what? That question came a little earlier. Most shootings and murders are usually 80% somewhere between people who know one another. Information that we had was that they did know this person. They didn't know Mr. Johnson. It's unknown if Mr. Johnson knew them, but the information that we got through the interview was that they knew Mr. Johnson.
Did Mr. Johnson know Officer Holly?
I'm sorry?
Did you know Officer Holly?
That's a different crime scene, different set of circumstances. It is unknown. Well, what I can say is that I've received calls from people in the city. I've received information from the consent decree monitoring team. I've received calls and had conversations with leaders across the city that the department performed admirably in this situation.
Much improved.
Much improved, a vast contrast, and just very different than what we have seen in the past. That is the expectation that we have of our department and the level of excellence that we expect from them every single day. And you know what? They delivered. Thank you all.